Welcome to Mining Review Africa, and we are at Mining Indaba 2026. And I'm speaking to Jude Uzonwanne, who's the CEO of the Africa Gold Council. Jude, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yes, my pleasure, Gerard. Thank you.
Okay, now the Africa Gold Council was officially launched at this year's Mining Indaba. Give me a bit of a background about the history, about why it was formed, and what its objectives are.
Absolutely. So the origin story dates back to about 2019, coming out of a mining conference that happened in West Africa, where one of the outcomes of those discussions was we needed a much more, for lack of a better term, robust intervention to support the growth of not just mining, but gold specifically in Africa. One of the keynote speakers at that conference was the World Gold Council. And so a number of my colleagues, including Nere, Nico, and Nicole Smith, they had conversations with them. The council was very supportive and said, look, the range of challenges that we see in the African market, we don't necessarily have a remit to tackle them, but we'll be highly supportive of you guys taking those challenges on. So over the years, folks have gone back and forth talking about what's the best way to approach it. And finally, in the last 12 months or so, a small group of us coalesced around the idea of creating a nonprofit to lead this challenge. So we got together, registered a company in South Africa, and thus began the work. Our focus is really on thinking about how do you transform the market for gold in Africa? How do you move from beyond just mining gold and exporting the ore to really inventing a whole ecosystem? So when we think of the end game, what should it look like? It's a combination of gold becoming part of currency reserve management in Africa. So having African central banks buy gold that's refined in Africa, that originates in Africa, and adding it to their reserves and storing it here in Africa. Having households use gold increasingly as a store of value, as an anti-inflationary measure, and as a way of passing savings back and forth between generations, which in some respects is a return to the old ways. Families used to, depending on where you were on the continent, families used to buy gold. We would like to revive that. It's also about bringing gold in a tasteful way back into our day-to-day lives. So having jewelry made on the continent. So getting our African creatives involved in designing, preparing, and bringing to market a range of jewelry. And then, of course, there are the industrial uses of gold as well. So for us, it's really about creating jobs, raising the level of value creation around gold, and getting our people, our governments, our communities into a much more healthy relationship with gold mining.
Absolutely. Now, Jude, there's no doubt there's plenty of potential for gold mining on the continent, but something that is lacking is investors.
Yes.
Right. So what is the role of the Africa Gold Council in attracting investment into gold projects on the continent?
So it's a great question, and we've begun to have conversations with. So depending on kind of how you look at things, some would argue that it's about creating better standards that are globally recognized and that would attract more global investors. We take a slightly nuanced view in that, yes, you need to elevate the standards. We need to be at the top of our game, learn from the best, also innovate to reflect our own market conditions. And we want investors that are African and investors that are global. So there isn't one single type of investor. We want that diversity. What the council will be doing is we're committed to building a better data set about the gold economy. So there are roughly over almost 30 countries where there's gold mining going on, and the rest of the continent is a consumer of gold. But as one of the speakers on our panel this morning said, exploration is hard because there's very limited risk taking around that.
Yeah.
And I was delighted to hear the head of mining for the Africa Finance Corporation, talk about an initiative that they intend to announce in the next few months that would create more of an exploration facility or to support that. What we at the council intend to do is working with financial institutions across the value chain. So when we were at a gold conference in Lagos in October, we had good conversations with the Lagos Commodity Exchange, talking about how do you create financial instruments that can be used to fund the value chain. And the more innovation we can help champion, and the more activity that comes from counterparts across the system, the better. So our focus will be, I would love to have $1 billion sitting around to support a whole bunch of startups, but I think what we can help do is structure the ecosystem, create tools that can be made widely available. So maybe, as simple as helping lay out some of the risks and ways of managing those risks and sharing that knowledge and insight into the marketplace. That's we view ourselves as being a catalytic advocate, using data to drive insight and then using those insights to drive decision making. And we want to democratize access to those insights. And we'll push, we'll cajole, we'll beg, we'll plead, but we will be actively involved in driving that financing across the value chain.
Okay. One final question, Jude. Now, let's take a country like Ghana, one of the world's largest gold producers. Up to 40% of their gold production comes from artisanal and small-scale gold miners. What is your organization's view on ASGMs, and how do we ensure that they are protected, and also that their contributions to these national economies is recognized?
I think the best way to answer that question is to reflect on some of the things we've seen in Ghana and the comments I've heard from the Ghanaian government representative at a panel in the last few days. So the figure that Ghana cites is they've made over $12 billion in inflows in golds over the last year,
Right.
driven by high prices, but also because they created this mechanism by which artisanal miners were able to sell to the Ghana Gold Board, which was a mechanism they created in the last roughly about a year or two, in response to trying to solve this problem of how do you bring the artisanal miners to the table. So their response was to say, look, let's legitimize them. Let's create a mechanism by which we can buy from them, and therefore create a mechanism by which they can also get benefits from the government, whether it's in form of fiscal policy, identity papers, or supply chain support. So it becomes a kind of a give and take. We are looking very closely at that model. There will be refinements to that model because not every country is the same. So there are parts of Mali, Burkina Faso, northern Nigeria that have security problems around artisanal miners. Same thing DRC, and the other places where it's more normal. I think what the council will be focused on amongst our priorities for this year is building that perspective, looking at case studies, and then delivering a set of guidelines and recommendations to governments and civil society to say, here's a roadmap on how you move forward on this. So that way you're turning down the temperature on a number of potentially volatile issues, but also you're integrating a group of active economic participants into the system. So I've spent a lot of my professional life working in agriculture, and we have a similar context.
Right.
Because there was always initially the temptation to say, let's ignore the small scale farmers and just build large industrial farms. But we figured out in agriculture that you can create supply chains that integrate the inputs of those small farmers. You set standards for them so that they know what they're producing to, and you pay them promptly. They have access to working capital, and these things function properly. There's absolutely no reason we cannot replicate similar toolkits in mining. And it's not just a gold issue, but in other precious metals. we can take an equally pragmatic and kind of problem-solving approach. So our role as the council is really to be a data-driven advocate on behalf of everyone. We're not working for government, we're not working for the industry, we're not working for communities, we're working for everyone.
Great stuff. Well, Jude, thank you for your insights. And I look forward to chatting to you next year
Yes.
about developments at the Africa Gold Council.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to reporting a significant amount of progress in the next year.
Great stuff.
Thank you, Zaid.
Thank you.
My pleasure.